Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this evening. I've got a really great guest I think you're going to enjoy tonight. My guest is Dr. Bennett. Now, I ran into Dr. Bennett on Twitter. He was one of those first accounts that I followed and kind of found on my own, or I shouldn't say on my own, but kind of before I knew what was going on Twitter. And then I ran into it and started following, and it's someone I've always enjoyed. Has always been one of my favorite accounts, and he's also doing a Substack. So if you haven't checked out his Twitter or his Substack, definitely make sure to look at the links below the video so you can follow him. But yeah, Bennett, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Absolutely. So the thing I always ask people to kind of kick things off is, how did you get plugged into kind of Twitter and Substack and everything? What kind of got you kind of into that corner of Twitter where some of us exist over there?
A lot of it was being desperately bored at work, and getting dialed into. I think I started in kind of like the Ace of Spades, Clark Hat, sort of like libertarian but pretty angry libertarian sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, and then met a couple of guys who were members of the church, who were just really really insightful and funny on a level that I had never seen before. It was Jesse Lucas and J. Reuben Clark were the first ones that I came in contact with, and they sort of introduced me to the wider sort of weird Latter-day Saint sphere. And that was sort of I sort of straddled between that world and kind of like BAPS kind of sphere. And yeah, that's kind of brought us here. And then Substack was just I've always liked to write, and just it was sort of an opportunity for me to do some long form. I find that Twitter kind of rots that part of your brain a little bit, makes it really hard to explain yourself in any kind of detail. Like, you get used to saying these just sort of really quick, pithy things that sort of demand that the user understand them. And then on a blog, you've got this blank canvas and you've got this challenge to like articulate something a lot more complex than that, and it's hard. It's really hard. So I've been trying to kind of flex that muscle.
Yeah, Twitter's a different animal. It really rewards, obviously, a whole different set of skills. And so it's good to, like you said, mix up your medium so you're not just only learning and training your brain to do that one thing.
For sure.
So one of the things that was pretty wild, of course, about your Twitter account was, getting quoted on Tucker Carlson. Tell me a little bit about that, man. Like, what was that like? How did you find out? Were you like watching the episode, or did someone send it to you? Like, what happened with that?
No, I catch Tucker when people post little clips on Twitter. I'm not a regular Tucker viewer. Sorry, Tucker.
Devastated. No. He's absolutely devastated.
He's just crying in his beer. Somebody linked it to me, and I was giddy that whole night, and I had pretty tight. I hadn't talked to anybody in real life about my Twitter account. I called my dad, and I said, I got quoted on Twitter on Tucker. He's a big he's that kind of dude, big Tucker fan.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very exciting, and it wasn't just that he called me a genius. So that was a pretty exciting night.
Yeah, you can feel kind of okay, right? Like that's not the
Yeah,
worst thing. Yeah.
yeah, and that's sort of I hope it didn't make me like big headed, but it did make me think like, okay, maybe I have something to say. Maybe there's something. Uh, Maybe there's something here that I should explore.
Yeah, definitely. So that's interesting. I know obviously you talked about, being part of LDS and, hooking or, kind of plugging in with some of those guys. But outside or the church, or is there anything else that has kind of shaped your political outlook, like anything you've read or anything that, kind of guides you alongside, that kind of experience with the church?
It's not. I mean, it's not going to be any big insights. Like, it would be super cool to have some like this of really thick, deep books that I could recommend to you. Honestly, probably probably the biggest influence was Slate Star Codex, at least in the beginning, because
Hmm.
he had this way of like, because he's such a smart dude, um, and very articulate, and also not sort of affiliated with us ideologically at all, and so it gave some kind of validation to like there's smart people who are not like totally bought into my sort of data environment, my media environment, who are seeing some of these things. And I read his reactionary explainer, where he talks about what reactionary politics is. That was my first introduction to Moldbug.
Oh, where he
Um,
tries to dunk on reactionary and like
no,
neo
no, it's
reaction.
the one where he tries to like steelman it and explain it.
Oh,
And
I thought he did one where he was trying to dunk on it.
no, he
Maybe
did.
I
He did two.
misunderstood.
He did two.
Oh, okay, I
So
see.
so the first one is here's what it is as articulately as I can explain it. Like, and he's great at conveying ideas that he does not actually believe in like the maximally compelling way. Um, and so I read that and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And then I read his anti-reactionary FAQ and was just totally unconvinced. um, and that one felt kind of, and that's ostensibly his actual views. And I don't know, he's a smart enough guy that I think if he really believed that, he could make a more compelling case. But uh, yeah, those were huge. And then I'm sure that I'm just warped by 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 Twitter at this point. I've read a lot of the books that we're supposed to read. I read Albion Seed, loved Bat Book. Like yeah, I feel like I'm just digging a hole here. I'm not not gonna give you any like interesting deep new stuff.
No, no, you don't have to come here with some esoteric, guy you dug out of the 15th century or anything. I was just curious because
And
I
that's
didn't.
and that's outside the tradition. Inside the tradition, I would say Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, one of the deepest thinkers out there, and totally, totally underrated.
Excellent. So the topic of our talk tonight was going to be focused on something you've been working on recently. Uh, as I understand it, you're starting a project, kind of a group of people of like support and networking for people who either are kind of anonymous and want to remain so, or and are trying to like pull themselves out of that kind of woke corporate environment, kind of being subject to these people who they know are like hate them, and it's kind of only a matter of time before they say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, and all of a sudden kind of their livelihood is in in jeopardy. So I don't know if you want to give a little background to kind of how you came to that, and start working on the organization, and then kind of what your goals are with that now.
Yeah. So I had been talking with some guys about uh, sort of the how do we solve like the problem that our friends that we see our friends are in, that we're in. And we kind of batted back and forth some like sort of manosphere type ideas. We've talked about kind of liminal order and like some mentoring and coaching type services, and it all seemed like kind of like, well, that clearly already exists, and I don't really want to. A lot of it's framed as like, we're going to teach you what your daddy didn't teach you, and it's like attracts people who are like, I want my daddy, and it's like it's a weird dynamic that I'm not about. And uh, so I had that kind of rattling around in the back of my head, and then a friend of mine, it was the day I was doxxed. A friend of mine was like, "Well, if you make it about that?" And actually, the morning that I was fired, it just snapped into place, clear as day. And I've never thought of myself as like somebody who could go into business for myself. I've always felt kind of like that's for somebody who's a lot more self-assured and risk tolerant. But that morning it was like, no, this is the idea, and you're going to do it, and it's going to work. And doxing ultimately is just sort of the central crisis of the problem, but it affects millions of people who will never be doxed, because of the chilling effect that it has, and it just it's that's the central weapon that they use. But ultimately, just the fact that all of the levers of coercion and thought control in our society are being leveraged by employers and not the state, which makes that regime harder to oppose and unseat, but it also introduces kind of novel vulnerabilities, and the vulnerability that I saw was why don't you just get a job that is less susceptible to that? It's sort of a the like, go start your own company, go do your own thing. Like that's not a universal solution, and it doesn't make what they're doing fair. But it is a way for you as an individual to make yourself more anti-fragile and refuse to be intimidated. And so I batted it around with some guys, some friends, and everybody was like, "Oh yeah, that's the idea. That's perfect." And got it started a week ago, and we've got over 50 subscribers now, and it's just been phenomenal. It's been unreal, the level of response to that, because I don't feel alone, and I knew I wasn't alone in that sort of not only anxiety and fear, but also kind of disgust. Like I hate the kind of work I'm doing, and I hate the compromises that I'm required to make, and I'm kind of disgusted with myself for going along. And it turns out there's just tons and tons and tons of people that are in that boat, feel exactly the same way. And so yeah, that's where that's at. It's called Exit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you started this, because literally I had just done an interview on someone else's channel, and they had said, what is going to be the next thing that people kind of on the right, kind of in the sphere, what's the next thing they're going to need to build? Like if there was one thing that you could create tomorrow just from the ground up by waving a wand, like what would you make? And my answer was immediately, we need an alternative network to get people employed, because like you're saying, not these levers of power are absolutely controlled by these employers. It makes it impossible for you to just go in and change one or two things and fix the system. It's kind of everywhere. and it's got this chilling effect where not only do people not say things at work, of course, like you know that, but they're also very careful in their online life. They're careful in their personal life because they never know when these things are going to leak through. And I think most importantly, it keeps people from organizing and making meaningful changes, because once you start putting your name to things, once you start putting, getting yourself out there, once you start building things, it becomes visible. And at any moment, the hammer could drop from your employer if the thing that you built suddenly gets marked by the ADL or something, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's been a big source of concern for me, because like this project is so unambiguously positive. Like, it's, we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're not even trying to rhetorically attack anybody. This is purely about helping people get into a situation where they personally are happy, or at no cost to anybody else. You know, and at the same time, I recognize that because it threatens the power of the system, it will be attacked. And so trying to thread that needle of like, we're trying to build a more, we're trying to build a system that allows us and our friends to be free and to speak their minds without fear. But just the act of trying to do that exposes you to vulnerability and critique. And so we're definitely not out of the woods, and it's a challenging environment.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it frustrates me a little bit because, I get a lot of heat sometimes because kind of the neo-reactionary thing is like, look, basically politics is over. There's not a solution there. You can go vote for Ted Cruz all you want, but it's not going to move the needle. And you need to start building these alternative institutions and that kind of thing so that you have a separate support network. And people say things like, oh, well, that's too dire, that's too doom and gloom. That you're just basically like, you're just thinking of a way to justify inaction. And then as soon as someone builds one of these organizations and actually like starts getting these things off the ground, all of a sudden it's like, well, that's doomed to fail. The government's just going to come and knock that over.
No,
And
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a voice that I've heard from outside. It's also a kind of a little voice in my own head. That's you have to understand that we are not outside the propaganda environment. The idea that your enemies have infinite power and infinite malice, and they see everything and they know everything, and every historical war the bad guys lost and they've been in charge from Cain. You cannot believe that. It's I mean, most importantly, it's not true, but also psychologically you cannot believe that. You cannot let yourself fall victim to that, because it's it's a recipe for inaction. It's a recipe for failure. And the guys that are the biggest on that, it is an excuse, not just for political inaction, but for not getting out of bed, not getting off the couch. Anyway, I could go on about that.
No, I agree 100%. It's understandable because there has been such a lack of realistic critical assessment of like where kind of people like us stand, what the situation is, that because of that, if you've been cynical, you've pretty much always been right because because the losing streak is long and the inability of people to grasp why that's the case is deep. And so it's always pretty much safe to bet against like conservatives getting anywhere or anything like that. But at some point, if the only point of doing that is just to be right and just to kind of shield yourself from having to like actually take action, actually justify something, then it becomes a real stumbling block. And I think one of the things that really often separates people is having that faith community, having that family, having something that makes it worth fighting for, even if you can't see exactly how this thing's going to turn out. To sit around and just watch these forces attack the things that you love is simply not an option.
Yeah, I definitely there was definitely a dark period, right? Once I knew that my employer knew who I was, um, there's a boundlessness to the threat there, because you don't really know who's attacking you. You don't know what kind of resources they have. You don't know what their attention span is like. Are they ever going to stop? Are you going to be able to find something else? Are they going to come chase you to that? And normal people in normal life are used to a threat environment that is sort of equal to their capacity, more or less, right? Um, you have your enemies and your problems, but they're not like cosmic is the wrong word, but way bigger than me. um, this enemy, this force that was sort of arrayed against me was just way bigger than me, and the only thing I could be sure of was that God was bigger than that, and and that carried me through that. And I honestly, if you're a pure materialist, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to help you in that crisis, um, because you will realize that you are so much smaller um, than this enemy, and and I needed to be um, in prayer to make that happen, to get
No,
through that.
yeah, absolutely. I tell people all the time, like, look, if you like, everyone is living the hardest life they've ever lived. So like, everyone has problems, but when you really hit the tragedy and like the really difficult stuff of life, when you lose people, when your entire world is kind of on the rocks, there's really no substitute. And so I think that's absolutely essential. But now we know kind of what exit came about from. So why don't you go a little more into depth to what it actually does? Somebody who joins this, becomes a member, what is it doing? What's the process? What's involved?
Well, so the goal is to have a brain trust of members who can direct people to opportunities. And it's we have sort of a broad skills list that's growing, um, but it includes, and it's not, it's not like it includes like prepper homestead type stuff, how to raise chickens, how to raise beef, vegetables. Um, but that I wanted to be very clear that it's not like we're all going to go hide out in the woods. That's not what exit means. Because we're also talking about, how do you get a remote job that makes it so that you can be hired by anyone in the country and you don't have to sell your house and uproot your family? Um, uh, what if you want to learn a trade? What if you want to learn how to be a general contractor, a plumber, a welder? You know, it's I'm not proposing one solution. I'm saying let's gather all the possible solutions to the one problem, which is this sort of corporate slavery dilemma, the corporate coercion. Um, and I'll give you an example. So last night we had a friend, and it was supposed to be like our sort of inaugural call, our getting to know you administrative, here's the schedule type call. But a friend in the group was in crisis because he was afraid of being doxxed and urgently needed to find some other employment. And throughout the course of this call, and it's my first call with these guys too, so I don't know what's going to happen. I'm thinking, am I going to have to carry this, or is it going to be awkward, or whatever? But I mean, these guys just had great insights, great support. We got that guy 3 direct referrals to jobs that he's kind of able to take his pick of. He hasn't settled on one of them, but like we've we found a viable possibility space for him to make it so there'd be no interruption in his income, no need to move, sell his house. And that's the dream for me, is if I can get together a group of guys, because it's not going to be me. I don't have any great specialized skills to save anybody, but I do feel that I can get the group of guys together who can find a solution to kind of anybody's problem, and so that's the dream, is to do that for as many guys as I can, make it so that they're not and do it enough so that the other guys who are in the group are not scared anymore, because they've seen us do this. They've seen the process. They know they're not alone, and they know that the people who are standing with them are not impotent, because several of our guys have been through this already, and there was a sense of like, some of these guys are well loved, and all kinds of people reached out, let me know if there's anything I can do. And that makes you feel good. And totally appreciate that just moral support. But a friend of mine who was going through this said, even if 50 of those guys sort of vaguely ask around, that doesn't materialize into a job for me. That doesn't solve my problem. And so I wanted to kind of hone that energy, because I know, and again, I know that all these people, like if they had the solution in their hand, they would give it in a heartbeat. Because there's a lot of love in our community. But I felt that I could sharpen that into something immediate, something actionable, something more real and reliable. So that's how I feel it's going, and I couldn't be more pleased with how it's gone so far.
Yeah, and I think that's a big deal, or just being willing to, organize and have the impetus to kind of bring these people together, even if like you said, you're not the guy in the room, but you are the person pulling people together. A lot of times, people ask me, "Hey, what can I do? How can I get involved? How do I plug in to these kind of things?" And so often, I tell people, "Look, there is no roadmap for you here. Like, we're all doing this by the seat of our pants. Okay, we're all trying to figure this out at the same time. No one's gonna come by and like pluck you out of whatever you're doing and say, hey, here's your job in whatever. And so you've got to kind of make those moves, and that means you are going to have to stretch and do things you're not comfortable with, that you don't have a stack of credentials somewhere to do, because the job you're about to try to do literally didn't exist before. We're just all going to be clearing paths here, and either you have the confidence and the willingness to get in there and make it happen, or you don't. And so I don't think people should be afraid of being willing to get out there and make some mistakes and try some stuff and figure this stuff out. Because if they don't do it, if no one's willing to go out there and put the elbow grease in and kind of clear this path for people to follow behind, then who will, right? And so I'm glad that you're taking the time to do that.
Well, and there's also we're kind of a weird group of guys, and it's a weird time, and I think maybe sometimes we overstate how weird the dilemma is, because a lot of what you're describing is just kind of being a man, like
Yeah.
there's no instruction manual. You do have to kind of just feel things out and try things and talk to people, and so and again, going back to kind of the black pill thing is like things are harder in a lot of ways, and they're definitely weirder than they've been historically. But I think our guys do sometimes overestimate the enemy, and they overestimate the challenge, and they let their fear kind of have the run of them. And so anything I can do to mitigate that and show people a path, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and I see some people saying like, so digital country club, and it's like, yeah, guys, like absolutely, right? Like, where do you think all these people who are using power over you now, where do you think they got the connections they have? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
With exactly these kind of organizations. So 100% digital country club. Absolutely. Like your strength is going to be the network of people around you. And yeah, getting together and building these is absolutely essential.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one of the things that I realized as this started to happen was that I personally had at least half a dozen people that I knew I could reach out to. And so I've talked to a lot of people who are in this kind of mentorship, professional networking type space. And when I've asked them, like, what can I do to get out of my current situation? A lot of times their answer was, why don't you jump into this professional coaching, networking type space? And I it's sort of like the guy who sells a book about how to become a millionaire, and the answer is, well, you just write a book about how to become a millionaire and you sell the book. And I didn't want to be that guy. And my friends who were trying to help me out, they're not that kind of guy either. But I was like, it can't just be turtles all the way down. So but what I realized was that I'm not in that position. Like I have enough connections that if this wasn't the thing that I wanted to do, I know half a dozen people that I could call and figure something else out. And it might not be as fun, but it's a solution. And so I realized, like, instead of me taking those, I could help direct other people to those who for whom it maybe is a better fit. Because I do feel like this is something special that maybe not everybody could do. And a pretty unique opportunity for me.
So let's go ahead and turn it to maybe some more broad issues, since now we have an idea of kind of what Exit is doing and kind of what that organization is. Obviously, pretty much everything is going on simultaneously right now. Kind of in politics and in the news. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on where you think things are going with kind of the current pandemic situation. Obviously, we've got more and more the federal government is talking about things like the possibility of mandates, vaccine passports. You've got a lot of different pressures. You've got some governors pushing back. You got people like DeSantis who are trying to, withhold paychecks to teach, to school districts that aren't, or that are trying to impose mask mandates. So we're starting to see kind of the axis on how possibly, I guess, some level of resistance, possible regional resistance to kind of what the federal government is doing could come about. What do you think is kind of coming next? What do you see in the next 6 months or a year? I know it's always dangerous to predict the future, but
Yeah. I mean, and especially in this environment where uh, it's increasingly clear that just the rules don't apply. There's not a lot of internal constraint on anybody's behavior. My intuition is that it won't go on forever. They'll I mean, the level of pushback that they're getting, like I don't know. It's hard to say, but I guess I'm kind of like a believer in things being sort of more boring than people anticipate. Like people draw the trend line and they say, well, if the trend continues, then the Earth's going to fall into the sun, and it's like, well, but the trend won't continue. Like if there's something, it's going to be interrupted, and I think that the pushback is going to lead to some moderation in the approaches, and there's probably not going to be, nobody's going to be strapped to a gurney and injected with anything. I don't anticipate that. I think the corporate coercion will be allowed to continue apace. I think people will get fired for not being vaccinated unless they push back in an organized way, as we've seen just handful of people do. So yeah, I think that's my response. Is it's not going to be. They're going to avoid a really like bad optics dystopia. They're going to stay with the good optics dystopia, which is sort of corporations doing all the dirty work. Or and the other thing they can do, like they're using this. They're clearly using this to obtain deeper control over people, and there is an extent to which playing that card becomes counterproductive when they start to lose their grip. And I think that they have a better calibration of where that line is than a lot of our guys do. And that's kind of why we get them wrong a lot.
Yeah, I think that you're right that the corporate version of this is going to be where the ground actually is gained. I don't see, like you said, strapping anyone to a gurney. I don't think you're going to have camps. I don't think they're going to be rolling in and moving all the unvaccinated into ghettos or anything.
Right.
But I think where all the and the real pressure, and I think this is just as dangerous, to be honest, is the corporate pressure. I think it's going to be pretty impossible to stay employed. It's going to be very difficult to enter stores. Again, I think it's going to be state by state. I don't think places like Florida are going to go this way quite as fast as others. But I think because the corporations can work across political boundaries, you'll still have this problem, because this is always the kind of the poison pill, right? Is you can have some guy like DeSantis standing strong against any kind of federal mandates or trying to stop different areas of the state doing things on the government level, but different businesses. I mean, is he going to be the guy who goes in and tells Target that you can't ban unvaccinated people? Is he going to be the guy that tells Walmart that you can't mandate vaccines for your staff? The violation of of that free market, right? I think that's a real blind spot, even for kind of the best of the GOP guys. I don't think they're willing to take those steps that they really pretty much have to take, because otherwise it's just going to be a vaccine mandate by another name.
Yep, absolutely, totally agree.
Yeah, so if we think that this is going to continue, obviously with corporations, then what you guys are doing becomes even more important. But I do think it's interesting that you said you think that the level of pushback is going to make them slow down. I would have said that like a year ago, maybe. I'm less confident about that now, but I guess being able to funnel everything through the corporations means they really don't have to go that last mile on their own.
Yeah, well, it's also using sort of the corporate lever is not a complete solution for them. The corporate coercion is an instrument of elite and upper middle class control. It's a way to keep kind of the bourgeois kind of kulak class pacified. There's a whole nother world of working class people that can't really be touched by this. And those folks are going to continue to do what they've been doing, and the media is going to continue to blame that on sort of the fat MAGA cartoon character with the visible stink lines off of him. When it's really, it's minority communities that are having the highest levels of vaccine hesitance, and they don't have. There's no optical way for them to attack that problem, and so that's just going to stay the way it is. And I guess good news, bad news. The fact the problem never goes away means they can just keep pounding this drum forever.
Which is kind of what they want, right? You always have a ready-made enemy. I was making the joke. We had some I think it was Mashable blaming the anti-vaxxers for Suicide Squad not grossing enough money. It's like Gamergate 2, guys. Let's ride. You're gonna be you are the new whipping boy for literally every issue that some media hack has with society. You get to be the new person for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was absolutely insane. I also enjoyed just I haven't had a time to ramble on about headlines, so I hope you'll indulge me for a moment.
No, please.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the what was it, the Nation headline about Joe Biden presidential civil disobedience.
Yeah.
A rare act of presidential civil disobedience by ignoring the law when it comes to looking at COVID stuff. Guys, I feel like there's another name for when the executive ignores
the
standing law. Yeah.
Yeah, and what do you even say about that? Like it's clearly so I'll be honest with you, the experience of going through this and sort of being forced to have conversations with people that I would never willingly talk politics with in my personal life has revealed to me that there is a level of distrust and a level of they're not buying it any more than we are. There's huge swaths of people. We pass around these ridiculous headlines and we talk about it like the normies are just sort of swallowing that whole. And there definitely is an extent to which they're maybe not asking the right questions because they haven't been sort of directed to those questions. But I mean, that was true of me. Like, I think of myself as a pretty smart guy. And when I first got onto Twitter, I had just got done voting for Evan McMullen. Yeah, I know.
Brave of you to admit that.
I am kind of a hero. And it was literally like it was a series of conversations with my LDS buddies, and they were like, nope, wake up. Like you need to be asking the right questions. And that kind of turned it around for me. So I would say people should not assume that normies are sort of buying all these stupid headlines, these asinine headlines. Like, they know that the media is ridiculous. Antifa is about as popular as Hamas. Like, that That's a real phenomenon. They do think those things are ridiculous. It's the it's the stuff that they have not been introduced to or have been just encouraged not to think about. Those are the things where they sort of maintain uh, a lot of cognitive dissonance and silly opinions.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like you said, they want you to believe that everybody's kind of on their side and against you, and then there's this monolith of opinion that they control that's completely insurmountable. But you do realize that really a lot of this is held together just by some very narrow pressure points, right? Like
Yep.
just the right classes, the right set of people, the right opinion makers, and yeah, by manipulating those, they get a lot of travel. But at the end of the day, there's only so much soft power does. And when you start making the kind of
Especially when you're
accusations,
lighting it on fire.
yeah, exactly, right, yeah,
Like actively destroying it. And that's another thing that you know guys talk about, like all of this sort of norm violation and breaking the law or ignoring the law, sort of ignoring the rules. They treat that as if it's evidence of our enemy's total victory, that now they can just go mask off because it doesn't matter what we think, and it doesn't, in public opinion's irrelevant. um, and that just seems to be obviously the opposite of the truth to me. uh, these are the behaviors of people who are holding on by their teeth to the control they have over this system. It is flying apart on them. And so yeah, they're breaking a lot of rules because they're panicking. And and that's, I don't know if that's necessarily like a white pill, because it's a dangerous enemy to have, somebody that's in this sort of locked in this existential struggle riding the tiger. um, but I do believe that is the case. These are the actions of a weak power structure, not a strong one.
yeah, I think that's right. And Moldbug talked about how one of the biggest powers is the procedural, the manipulation of procedural outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's what really allows this soft power to be so, they can exercise so much power without having to be accountable for it.
Yeah.
But when you're basically just collapsing the procedures and just going straight for the power, at the end of the day, these guys are foxes, they're not lions.
Yep.
That's not how they operate, and they don't really know how to apply raw power in a way that doesn't just completely destroy their credibility. So they might, like you said, they're wounded, and wounded animals are dangerous, and you shouldn't take them lightly or pretend that they aren't a problem. But it's also a mistake to think that the tiger that is raging out of control because it's deeply wounded is not in serious trouble.
Yep. Absolutely.
All right, guys. So I'm going to start taking some questions. I already see that we have one in there. So if you have any questions for Dr. Bennett, go ahead and put them in there. Anything for him or me, and we'll go ahead and start taking a look here. I see we had looks like fight or flight here for $5. Thank you for your donation. Says, how do I avoid that at work if I don't get a religious exemption? Need the two jobs to survive. What do you think? What would be? Obviously, it's going to depend on the situation, set of skills, all that different stuff. But if you just have some general advice for people, at a glance, what do you think that would be?
Jeez. Yeah. I mean, on an immediate level, it's really tough. Um, I get, like Auron was saying, a lot depends on your flexibility and your ability to get other work. Um, you need to take advantage of the fact that we are in a very tight labor market right now. I mean, they're begging people to go work at all kinds of sort of entry level type jobs because the sort of de facto UBI has made it so that people just don't have to go. Um, So be aggressive about looking for other opportunities. There are people out there who will hire you like sight unseen right now. And obviously, if you want to talk to me personally about exit and what we're up to, and potentially being able to help, give me a shout. But yeah, without knowing more, that would be my advice.
Absolutely. And while we're waiting to see if anyone else has any questions, is there any topics that we didn't touch on or we didn't get to, any aspects of what you're doing that you'd like to go ahead and talk about real quick?
Uh, yeah. One of the interesting sort of topics that I want to explore. It's not really central to what we're doing, but it's sort of an allied effort. Um, is there's a lot of I am told from guys who know a little bit about kind of the tech and VC scene that there's quite a lot of energy around, because these smaller employers, at least, and even some of the larger ones, are dead sick of having to grovel to this sort of HR panopticon, and having to pay lip service to it. But it's any tall poppy that kind of pokes up its head and says, we're hiring apolitically, triggers a firestorm of, like, obviously you're closet fascists, you're closet Nazis, because
Right.
you're telling people to just keep their heads down and shut the fuck up and do their work. Um, and so there are lots of people with lots of money who are looking for solutions to that, including um, some of the usual suspects in kind of crypto. Like, are there ways to anonymize recruiting, anonymize networking, with technical solutions? And I don't know if I sort of am at liberty to say a ton about that, but there's interesting work going on.
Yeah, and it's funny. At the end of the day, we'll all be anons, right? Like that's the only way anyone will be able to operate with this. Like you said, the panopticon. We just have this total state going, and it's to the point where the people who need to get things done it's become impossible for them to continue playing this game and actually get the things done they need to. And so I feel like either things collapse or someone figures out a creative solution. There's really not a lot of other options.
Yes, that's in the medium to long term. That's what I see as a solution. Either, and I don't think that it's just political change. Um, if it was just political change, you could maybe see an environment where our guys took the reins of the panopticon, but it's still a panopticon. Uh, the the problem of all of the country's various tribes having to speak, having to do their sort of private business, their private tribe building, which involves uh, joking about and hating on other tribes. Um, all of us having to do that all together is a recipe for social strife. And anonymity is one solution to that, but it sort of makes the problem diffuse, because instead of knowing that I should be mad at my particular coworker for saying all that rude stuff about my tribe, whatever it is, um, I'm just sort of vaguely aware that there are all these people who hate my tribe and say all these things, and so it sort of generalizes the distrust and the animosity, which is ultimately what we're seeing. All of these sort of personal vendettas and personal slights and hostilities are becoming viewed as systemic problems. And so So yeah, it's not a permanent solution unless we can find a way to, like Urbit's doing, create places where we are uh, truly alone with our tribe, um, and and where we can be truly anonymous. And I would love to see that work. Um, the UI is not ready for me to use regularly, and it's definitely not ready for me to like send to a non-tech savvy friend.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it's a fascinating project, and I really hope that it gets to where it needs to be.
Yeah, those that always seems to be those hurdles for those alt tech options.
Yeah.
I try to support them as much as possible, but if sometimes they just become unusable, and so that's always like the first hurdle there for them to clear.
Yep.
But let's see, Bolero 393 for 9.99. Thank you very much, sir. Says, have any of Exit's members been forced to have moved and uproot their families or family members after being doxxed? Might your mission include supporting or support for them eventually?
Well, yes. So my dream is to have the resources at our disposal to even do things like legal defense, and because I know I'm not the only one that has seen various people who are outside of the sort of protection of the state um, getting just screwed in the courts. And why are they dealing with a public defender? Why don't they have an actual lawyer um, to help them? And so that would be one thing. Yeah, and charitable giving to help people. Obviously, the goal, if someone comes to me and they're in that situation, the goal is to get them into a situation where they don't have to do that. Um, that's not always going to be the case, and so yes, the mission eventually will be to sort of to support them any way that we possibly can, and obviously, as we grow, our ability to do that grows.
Yeah, there really does have to be a spirit of kind of in this togetherness, because if in back in the day when everybody was kind of near each other, and if something happened, if a travesty befell you, the church is coming together, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Now people in this situation are so spread out, like you said, that it's hard for maybe some of those local physical organizations to offer kind of mutual aid societies. But if you have something that that people can plug into no matter where they're at, then that gives people a lot more confidence and like something more to rely on for sure.
Absolutely, and it's sort of outside the scope of well, it's outside the scope of solutions that I've identified personally. But I don't believe that a purely online network is a total solution to the problem. I think we
Hmm.
need physical, geographic proximity um, to to live the way we really want to live. And my sort of pipe dream hope is that by giving people the tools to be financially free, um, maybe I liberate some cluster. Maybe we set some cluster free of of software guys, and they can go live anywhere they want. So they go move somewhere together, and they build friendships, relationships that that's something people have to do individually. But then there's a place, and then maybe those guys need some trades guys, and those guys can go. And you see what I'm saying? Like giving a critical mass of people with a critical mass of financial resources the freedom to move about. You can see how it might create these uh, these spots for that sort of community to agglomerate.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I said, what so many people are hesitant to build anything because just putting themselves out there, putting their name to something, forming something, could put them in peril. If the more people you have who are not scared of that, the more people who have that independence and that network that they can fall back on, the more that can snowball. Because like you said, once you get that community going, then they need one thing, and then they need another, and then they want to expand to something else, and all of a sudden you've got something real that came out of just some people online banded together to make sure that they could stay employed.
Yep, that's the dream.
So our next one here is Redisco Tech for $10. Thank you. I appreciate the chat, gentlemen. Any advice regarding exit for someone stuck in the endless lockdown of Australia? Sorry, that's Australian $10, so they're fun bucks. But thank you. No, it's what my buddy in Australia always called them. Yeah, I mean, Australia is an absolute mess, man. I just feel bad for you right off the bat. They talk about going from zero to police state out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what Bennett's going to say, but my advice is get out as fast as possible if that's an option. But I know that's not always great advice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a ton about Australia's legal situation. I don't know if it's possible to get on a plane right now, or if they're locked down that tight. We do have one of our guys is an Aussie, and I'm sure that he'll have something to say about this after the call. Yeah, I mean, one way to avoid some of the lockdown stuff is, again, this sort of remote work type model where because I'm never going to have to wear a mask or get vaccinated because I work out of my house, and that's not just makes it a lot easier. So I would be interested in, if it was me, I'd be interested in remote opportunities. And then, yeah, just trying to get out. I think one thing that's interesting about Australia, I have had relatives live there, is you got some proximity to some cheap, beautiful places to live in the Pacific. And so I'd be looking. So I have a relative that spent time in Australia and then went up to Indonesia and Thailand and sort of raised his family in kind of a not nomadic but very kind of free basis while working remotely, and just piling up tons of money because it doesn't cost anything to live there. So that's one option.
Yeah, all of my real knowledge about Australia comes from a friend who lived there, and so that's about as much as I could say too. But good luck, man. It's absolutely wild what's happened there.
Yeah.
So say no to Soma says, what do I tell normies about why I don't have one vax and without exposing my power levels? So I should probably stop for a moment and say, guys, in general, like it is never like I've always been fine with vaccinations. It had never occurred to me before this one to even worry about them. The only reason I have any questions is just the way this thing has come out. It just seems like there's always, oh, you're going to need the 19th booster, and actually it turns out it doesn't. You can still catch stuff, you can still carry it. All the things that have been kind of coming out about it, that it's really is particular to this one. But I totally understand why so many people with everything that is happening, and just it's the people pushing it more than anything, of course, which isn't always the best thing, right? You don't want to be completely reactive to what your
Sure.
enemies are doing. But yeah, what would I would say, for the most part, you don't have to, right? Like you're not wearing a Star of David yet, at least, right? So you don't have to really go out and make a big deal. I don't spend a lot of time, personally, trying to like just talk these kind of things to random people or even people I know unless they're actively expressing interest. Like I don't hide these things too much unless I have to, but I don't really go out of my way to evangelize because
No.
I want to know someone has some interest before we really decide to go in a deep dive.
Yeah, and maybe this guy's in a situation where people are sort of aggressively asking about it. If I were to be like cornered, did you get the vax? Why not? I imagine that I would say the truth, which is I oppose it on the grounds that it's not their place to tell me, basically. That it's not their right to decide what I'm going to take. And if they were to push harder, I might talk a little bit about potential medical consequences, but really, honestly, I haven't even explored the medical facts all that deeply, because that's really not what it's about for me. What it's about for me is screw you. I'm not doing that. Like, it's none of your business. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I don't care what the efficacy is or not. Once you're talking about, making a digital, mark of the beast for me to swipe every time I need to purchase something, I don't care what it is. Right?
Yeah.
Like the issue is not what you're requiring me to get. The issue is that I'm being required to prove it everywhere I go and in every interaction I have.
Yeah. And I, honestly, I have a doctor friend that I believe to be an honest person, who takes COVID very seriously, and saw some pretty serious impacts to people from the disease. So I'm not in the camp of like it's fake and they're just using it to what I think is happening is it's a real problem, and they're really frustrated that they've burned all their social capital and nobody freaking trusts them. And they're blaming that on the people who distrust them, because that's psychologically easier for them than to admit that they screwed up. And also, even that is also decentralized. It's it's not like my friend who's frustrated that people won't get the vaccine lied to anybody. He's like, I've seen the literature, this is what I believe, and it really sucks that people won't get the vaccine because I'm watching people get hurt. And so, with here's the real answer to your question. With everyday ordinary people that you encounter, try to be understanding. Try to see their point of view, and if you can, take it easy on them, because everybody is amped up to 1,000 right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really easy for people to forget like how, psyoped everybody is on this,
Yeah.
right? It's not just you. And remember, like never forget, never let them make you forget that at the beginning of this thing, the left was totally against any precautions, any of this stuff. They downplayed the threat the whole time. At the beginning of this thing, they were calling it racist to be worried about COVID. Nancy Pelosi was saying, you have to go down to Chinatown and hug the first Asian person you see to show that you are not scared of the racist propaganda about this disease.
Yeah.
You had people in San Francisco saying, this is never going to be a problem, and anybody who doesn't go to like a parade at the beginning of this thing is, like all this stuff. You had Kamala Harris saying, I'm not getting a vaccine just because Trump told me. I don't trust this, CDC that's run by Trump. These people did all of this stuff. It's pure power. It's pure propaganda. The only reason that normal people don't remember that stuff is that these people literally control every organ of propaganda in the state.
Yep.
If they didn't have an ironclad grasp on literally almost every bit of information that flows out about this stuff, they would be held accountable for flipping 100% on this. But because they control it, basically they got to take something that they played as no big deal, and as soon as it seemed like it was actually going to be a problem, they flipped it and had conservatives, defending, keeping schools open. The same people who
Yeah.
complain about these places being indoctrination centers, right? They
Yeah.
just got you dancing for their tune because they
Sure.
control all this stuff.
Sure. We did the same thing. We
Yeah.
flipped too.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
because I had a full visor and full N90 for the respirator. And in that early time, I actually went to the store wearing it. You know, and went and bought a bunch of wheat and oats and rice, and which I'm glad I did that part. That was good.
Yeah, it's good anyway.
Yeah. So you got to realize, like, yeah, Nancy Pelosi's full of shit, but that doesn't really have anything to do with you and your aunt,
Mm-hmm.
or you. Like, you should love the people around you, and try to be good to them, and hope for the best.
Yeah, never let these people make you fight your family. Don't give them that
No,
level of power
no,
over you.
never, ever,
Yeah.
ever. It is so pointless. So I had some friends that had just a knockdown drag out internally over all this stuff, and it was just tragic to me, because it was like, not one of you can do anything about this on either side. That we are all just little people here. We are not gonna fix this by yelling at each other. There's no solution that's gonna develop from this fight. And so you gotta just be human beings, and stop.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, I think we're getting to the end of our talk. We're a little bit over an hour now. But thanks again to everybody for stopping by. I appreciate the questions we had there. Like I said, definitely make sure that you are following Dr. Bennett on Twitter, and that you are checking out his Substack. And of course, if you are interested in Exit, definitely go ahead and check that. I put all the links for his stuff down below. And I'm sure, if you want to send out something, about Exit tonight on Twitter, everybody will be able to catch that
Yep.
and see more about that. But thanks a lot for coming on, man. This was a really good talk. I appreciate it.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, guys. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming by. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.